Hello and welcome to Agents of Nonprofit. My name is Alexander Lapa, and I'm here to speak with everyday superheroes helping nonprofits. Joining me today is Francesca Frederick to talk about tech and fundraising. Francesca, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Alex.
So, for people who are hearing you for the very first time, could you please share your superhero origin story?
It starts with dance. I grew up dancing and I actually went to college at the Boston Conservatory, now the Boston Conservatory at Berkeley, where I studied dance. I was planning to be a professional dancer. And I found out my senior year that I didn't like performing. I just liked taking class and liked taking class with my friends. But I still really loved the arts and I loved dance. And I needed to figure a way to be part of that world without being a dancer. And so I chose to take an internship at Jacob's Pillow Dance Festival, which introduced me to the other side of the arts, the business side, the administrative side. And through that, I found fundraising and I made my way to New York, where I worked in the nonprofit sector for arts organizations. And I fell in love with that world. I fell in love with fundraising. I fell in love with supporting the arts, supporting artists. And from there, it just snowballed into a whole career in fundraising.
It's amazing how sticky the nonprofit industry is. Fundraising, of course, being probably one of the biggest pillars of it. But I've countless people I've met, once they get into it, it's just so sticky. They don't want to leave. They find their people.
You really do find your people. I mean, it was interesting because the arts was already a community, and then to even get into a deeper community of people that support the arts, it was beautiful.
So you have like what's that movie again? Inception. Communities
Yes.
within communities within communities.
And honestly, as I've done work, because I'm what you would call in fundraising a bit of a hopper, you have some people who find their specialty, like they just do major gifts or they just do annual or just do marketing. I was a bit of a hopper, so I dabbled in the grant space, the major gift space, the annual fund space, and I also dabbled across sectors, so the arts, dance, human services, education. And in that, you also find these like little groups of people that are just doing specific work in that space. There are people who just do work in annual fund, and they have their own communities and message boards and conferences, and it's just amazing. And I love that. I love the kind of door to another door to another door effect in any sector, but I specifically geek out about it in fundraising.
I mean, this is really a side topic, but the more you can specialize in something, the better you become at it, the more known you become at it, the more authority you build. When you become one of one, if you can be the fundraiser of arts, for example, I can't imagine there's millions of people in that space. And if you can be more specific, you can say, dancing, arts, fundraising. I mean, that's even more niche. So in general, if you're in the nonprofit industry or, providing some kind of service or a product, the more niche you can get, the more specialized you can get. It's counterintuitive, but you actually end up getting more clients, meeting not better people, but better leads, better fitting clients is what I want to say, and ends up working out in your favor.
Yeah, that's something I actually, I was talking to a young fundraiser. She was kind of bogged down by the work, specifically of human services. And she was thinking about getting out of the fundraising world and becoming a funder. And whenever a young fundraiser is looking to get out, I try to keep them in because, we need more people coming into fundraising. It's really important and great work. And so I was letting her know, I was like, I need you to know that there isn't a limit for what you can do in fundraising. You just scratched the surface. If human services isn't it, try another sector and maybe you'll find your passion there. Maybe it's education. And if, being a frontline fundraiser isn't it, maybe you need to be in development operations. Maybe you really love working with the technology. And so there is really a place for everyone in fundraising. And I think that's something really beautiful about this space that a lot of people don't know. It feels very flat and there's so much depth.
So in that fundraising space, technology is a big part of day-to-day operations. And I'm curious to know your perspective because you coming more from the art side, getting into the techie side, and And as we get into that conversation, maybe we can start by just giving a brief description of what you do today and what Grantyd is about.
Yeah. So I started Grantyd with my husband. He is my co-founder. And we founded it out of really a need, a very organic need. I was working in the major gift space in education at the time, and I was grant writing on the side hustling it. I was also on the law school track, and I also had two small toddlers. And so my husband had just been part of that first round of layoffs from Google, and he was meddling in all of my business, how I did the laundry, um, how how I was managing our shared Google Calendar, and he also was meddling in my workload and how I was managing that. And he basically saw me writing a grant and thought it was completely inefficient. I was doing a lot of had like a million tabs open, was doing a lot of copying and pasting, and he was like, there's definitely a solution that can automate this. And there were solutions that could help with language generation, but nothing that automated the workflow for grant writing and applying. So he actually made me a solution, and it was just for me to use. And I did use it. And I was like, wow, actually, this has saved me tons of time. It auto-populated my answers. And I was like, this is so easy, which was great. But I was just using it. And then we were like, oh, maybe I can like let a couple of my other fundraiser friends use it on the side while I'm in law school. We can sell it. We like found a logo through a logo generator online. Very techy of us. But then, and he was working on a completely different startup, a startup actually for tutors. But then we just saw we had something here. We saw the need, and we started talking to other fundraisers, and we just went for it. And it was a big leap. So officially a month ago, I left my full-time job in fundraising to be the CEO. I quit the law school track. My husband paused his other not paused. He completely killed it, the other startup. And we went with this full time. And it's all the things I actually love about fundraising, because I was actually telling someone my favorite thing about fundraising, and I didn't realize it, was fundraisers. And so now I get to talk to the people I admire the most, the people I was in the trenches with, the people that get it. And I get to provide them a tech solution that I firsthand experienced and found helpful and useful. And so it feels natural and organic, and the opposite of what I would assume being a tech CEO would feel like, which is a little like salesy. And it actually doesn't feel that way, because I love helping my friends. And I love this line of work. I love this business. I love nonprofit, and I love mission-based work. And so it feels good to be part of this greater mission and not. And I was listening to someone. It was actually I think he was the old COO of Chick-fil-A, and he said, if you're not selling chicken, you should be helping someone who is. And obviously, this is not chicken, but it feels really good to be in a place to help people push so many missions, to help so many people operationalize their workflow. It's very impactful and moving for me as a CEO, even though that's very self-fulfilled, and that part's a little icky, but I do love the work.
Sales really is about helping others. It's not about trying to sell ice cubes to Eskimos here. Like it's, a necessary item to someone that has it already. It's really to help, to make a difference. And when you believe in the product, and you always should as a salesperson or the service, you are legitimately trying to make the other person's life better. And there's nothing wrong with trying to get of being compensated for that effort and the product and the service, because you have to also live as well. But a lot of people think of sales as slimy or underhanded, but when it's done properly, when it's done well, you are legitimately helping other people. So take pride in that.
Yeah, I even to that point, I think it's been a mind shift for me, because a lot of people compare fundraising to sales, and that's something I think fundraisers always push back against, because it's not a product, it's a mission. So I think that's been something for me to kind of mentally rewire, is that I am in sales now, and that is okay. And even before, like, there were aspects of fundraising that encompass sales just by the nature of the work. And that's okay too. But I think that's very fundraiser coded to be like, it's not sales. But it's also okay to, to accept that that is no longer my world. And then there's some aspects of fundraising that are sales. And those tactics are helpful to pull people in, to tell a story, to engage, and to educate them on something.
I also want to show it to your partner because I'm totally the same kind of guy where I'm all about optimizing time, efficiency, and all of that. So I fully appreciate that he was poking around and trying to see what you're doing and saying, hang on, there's a better way. There must be a better way of solving that problem. And of course, by both being techies, he solved it with technology. And I'm curious if you could share a bit more about, how you. So I get the idea that the process was inefficient. He found a technical way of applying, or a way to apply technology to make it easier. What was that experience like for you and for the people that you're trying to help? Like the idea of introducing technology to accelerate or automate or simplify work that was typically done more long form.
Yeah, so I mean, it really does. What's nice about it is it takes the exact workflow of a grant writer and it optimizes that exact workflow. So it's not a top-down approach, which is what I love. It autofills your answers to the grant in the way that, using your language as the grant writer. So it's not content generation. It is auto population of your answers in the grant website, which auto population has been around, forever. And so it's nice to bring it to this space where it's so needed because grant writers and fundraisers and just people applying for funding, they're running on fumes. It's beat the clock, right? And but if I'm being honest, when he first introduced the idea to me, I was apprehensive because I was just like, one, there's no solution like that could exist, and I couldn't actualize how it would work. It just didn't compute to me because it didn't exist. I didn't have a frame of reference. And I have found that as we even continue to iterate the problem or the problem set or, try to hone in on certain aspects, my brain starts with, kind of, well, if that could exist. And, he always kind of pushes back with me saying, we don't know that it can't. So the starting with the negative, and that is how my brain worked within the tech space, because not that we don't have good tech in nonprofit, it's just not necessarily a fertile ground all the time for tech. And that's not necessarily because of, the lack of potential innovation. I think it's, people don't know that the space can be a fertile ground. I think, fundraisers are, a lot of us are tried and true, right? This is how I've always done it. So this is how I'm going to do it. And this has been working good enough, or even if it's not working good enough, this is what I know. And there's this sense of autonomy over the work, which I get because fundraising is emotional, nonprofit is emotional, giving is emotional. And so I understand why there's this apprehension, but it was difficult to even get me on board, and he was making the solution for me. And so I definitely step into the conversations with other fundraisers open-minded. I don't get offended by them very easily. I don't try to force it. I provide the option. I come at fundraisers in a very human way, and we built a product around how they work, making sure that it's fundraiser centric. It's not about overtaking or this will help you and I know it will help you. It's like, let's see if this will help you. You tell me. And if it doesn't help you, tell me what will. Tell me your work process. Pull me in. And I think when you center them, it actually provides for better solutions for everyone.
I want to make sure it's clear that nonprofits have access to the same technology as everybody else, right? There's nothing specific to any other industry that's not available to nonprofits. I understand certain technology might be price prohibitive, but the access is still always there. So, like as a technologist myself, I want to remind people that, hey, there might be a better way of simplifying or making your life easier with technology. And usually technology, for me at least, is a viable solution in addition to, other options available to you. But the idea is there is always a reluctance, to your point, a hesitation, an uncertainty, the idea of I don't know how to use it, therefore I don't want to use it
Mm.
type of mentality. This is what I know, to your point. Any ideas on how you've been able to, or any examples of how you've been able to overcome that in other people as you're introducing this new type of way of doing grants writing?
Yeah, it brings that saying to mind of how do you boil a frog, which, not a
Slowly.
great slogan, for the animal welfare people out there. But this idea that, you know, you should introduce things slowly to people so they can adapt. And I think technology sometimes can feel a bit like it's leading you. And that's where that autonomy piece comes in. And so, I always say to people, even when it comes to our product, start where it makes sense for you. So in our product, AI is just an option. You don't have to use AI to use our product. And we purposefully did that because not everyone wants to use AI. Do I use AI? Yes, I'm a fan. But I understand that you can use technology and step into the AI space. I use video calls as an example. You should be able to have access to do a video call, a video meeting. Whether you want to handwrite your notes or have AI take the notes for you, it's an option. That level of autonomy gives people power, and I think people want to still hold on to their power when it comes to technology. You know, I think about when you're implementing a tool, even in an organization. Start where you feel comfortable. Let's just implement using a shared calendar. Maybe that's where you start. Sure, there are all these, big project management solutions. Maybe you're not there. Maybe you're just in the shared calendar space for now. And that's okay. That's, the light step into it. And I think, within our product, being able to provide people options, whether that's the use of AI, whether that's the use of collaborating in the application or working singularly, work with autonomy. Because I know that's how I like to work as a fundraiser. And, I also think there are a wide variety of ages in fundraising, but we also do have a lot of fundraisers who, can skew older, who've been in this game a long time. And they've been so successful in their work, and so many young fundraisers look up to them. And so this idea of technology coming in, I think, kind of also dismantles that a bit. This idea of like, these are the people we're supposed to be listening to, but they're not using the same tools as the younger generation coming in. So how do we bridge that gap? And I think, again, it's that finding that common ground of like, where can we meet in the middle? What technology can we both be part of that doesn't, completely upend the relationship, or, throw out all of our systems we don't need to overhaul the entire organization today with like 10 new products. Who's allowed to have a product that they work with on their own that the rest of the organization doesn't have to have? What products can be just for one department versus another? So yeah, I think stepping into it lightly, and it's not a one size fits all. It can be Technology can be bespoke even if it doesn't feel bespoke.
Hey, Alex here. I want to take a brief moment and thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed this episode so far, please consider sharing it with someone who would also benefit from its insights. It's these kinds of referrals that really help the show grow. You can also show your support by making a small donation. I don't do corporate sponsorships or product placements, so I rely on your support to keep the show going. You can visit my website, agentsofnonprofit.com, and click Support Us in the top menu. Thank you kindly. I like the idea of starting small, even a shared calendar. My first thought, though, as you were explaining it, is, for example, that a shared calendar technology exists, but other people may not. I mean, it's a dumb example, but there are technologies moving so fast. There's especially with AI, it feels like every week there's a new AI company out there. I know it's not possible to keep track of it. Even I don't really keep track of it. And there are sometimes some really great technologies out there that not many people know, and definitely you don't know about. So it's like, in your opinion, how do you even approach the topic of saying, okay, you might not realize that there's a fantastic solution for you out there because you're not aware of it. And it's almost like you have to realize you have a problem first, or that there might be a better way of doing things, then doing some kind of research to find out what are your options available, try a bunch of them, and then pick one and then move it. And that's a lot of time and effort. And especially if you're not, this is research and improvement versus doing your actual job of fundraising, for example. Any ideas of how to tackle that issue?
Yeah, I think it is doing some work on, it is a lot of work on the front end, but I think it is important for people to assess their workload regularly, do an audit for themselves. And that's not just in technology, but in just general practice. I think the more we sit with ourselves and it was actually really beautiful to sit down with fundraisers and just ask them, like, take me through your day. They take me through applying for a grant, and you saw their wheels turning and them explaining some of you. I could see where their face dropped when they got bogged down by a task, or where they lit up. And so I think taking some personal audits of our workflow, of the work, what we enjoy about the work, what we don't enjoy, where we're already automating and we don't even realize it, can be really helpful. It's a mindset shift. And then you can start to do the research, but you'll find the research will be, I think, a little easier. It's like, if I'm thinking about it, it's kind of like AI prompting, right? The better you get at, prompting your AI, talking to the AI, it's not just the AI learning, it's you learning, right? You're learning how to better assess, like, no, this is what I meant. Like, let me get my words right. And so I think as fundraisers, as nonprofits, as people in general, the more we sit and audit our own workflow, we can get better at assessing what the actual issue is and then finding solutions that actually fit that issue, whether those solutions are tech or not, right? But obviously, I think tech is a wonderful place to start to fix solutions. But I think just doing that assessment of ourselves and our workflow, and then we can even take that to our team's workflow. But yeah, I think starting with the person. I worked at an organization. I remember one time there was a company that came to us, and I was working with my volunteer manager, and it was a specific product around doing Amazon wish lists and people being able to purchase things for your organization through this Amazon wish list, like volunteers. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, how niche. Like, I have a volunteer manager, but like you don't even realize how many orgs have that. And so they have this backlog where they're trying to play this middleman between this, online retailer, the donor, they're the volunteer manager. It's not, the old way of just dropping off donations. There's now this intermediary of an online shop where you can just have stuff automatically delivered. And I was like, wow, that took so much administrative pressure that you didn't even realize was conjured up out of online shopping booming. And so, that was a moment where you had to like reassess your workflow based on an expansion of a whole different sector. Without online shopping, that wouldn't have been a bottleneck. Now it is a bottleneck. And so I think, just constantly revisiting your workflow, because it will change based on the world around you.
I agree. I think assessments are a fantastic way to verify that what you're doing is still the best way to do it. And to give you an example, on a personal level, like every year, I think I have a kind of tasks that I set for myself where I do a revision of all the credit cards that I'm using to see, first of all, if I need to continue using the credit card, and should I change credit cards? Is there a new credit card or that exists, or one that I didn't see before that suits my purposes better today than it did in the past? And I've changed credit cards companies as a result of it to be able to get the best benefit for my buck, based on all these different conditions and changing conditions. So the idea of just setting aside some time during the year to research and to spend time being able to revisit what you're doing to make sure it still works for you, that maybe there might be a better way of doing it, that this is time well spent.
Yeah, and we all do that, right? Like, even you bringing up that credit card scenario, it made me think, I'm a mom of two kids, 3 and 5. And I think, right now we have a zoo membership, and that really benefits us. They get outside, they run around. But as they grow older, we might need to get a membership to, a Six Flags where they have a little more autonomy. They can go on rides. It's a little more engaging. And so we're all constantly reevaluating all of the things we sign up for, and just being able to move that skill set to other areas of our lives, I think can be really beneficial.
What about some considerations or things to pay attention to not to fall into certain traps? Because, one trap is a rabbit hole. An example I can give you is when I was doing research for which microphone to use for the podcast. You could spend days and days on the tech, for what is the right headphones, what's the right microphone, what's the best recording. Like, that would be one example of going maybe too far, or being careful of not to go too far when doing either research or investigation related to technology. Do you have any other examples of things that you can make sure people are aware of, that they don't fall into the little traps and missteps?
I think there can be a couple of traps when it comes to tech and fundraising. I think one trap that I see people fall into from actually a management place, specifically with AI, or companies rather, nonprofits rather, they say, we don't use AI. And they make that statement. We don't use AI. We don't have an AI. Our AI policy is not to use AI. We don't use AI. And you forget that as you bring people into the workflow, people have autonomy and they're using AI outside of work. And you will not stop them from using AI. And it is to your detriment to try to push AI away. Now, I'm not saying that you need to, fully embrace it and come on in, but you do need to come up with a battle plan on how to engage, even if you tiptoe in. Because as you bring people into your workforce, as you bring donors in, funders in, as you engage with people outside, unless you're completely going to operate in an isolated manner, as you engage, AI will become part of the conversation. And you want to make sure that you have a full understanding of what that looks like. And so I do think it's, that is a pitfall for people to say, they're anti-AI. I think that actually will cause them more harm in the long run. I also think that another pitfall in the AI space specifically is, some people are very much of the mindset if people aren't on board with AI, then I'm going to leave them behind. They can't be part of the conversations, or, that's their loss. Everyone else will reap the benefits, and that nonprofit or that group of people, they'll just fall. And I kind of have a different approach, maybe because I am a fundraiser. And so I see more of when we leave people behind in technology, we're now leaving the people they serve behind. And so part of the work, being a tech company and nonprofit, is to try to bring as many people with us. Now, still giving them that autonomy to choose their journey with us, but don't leave them out, because you're leaving out so many more people than just them. And that's something I've actually had to bring my husband to understand. He's like, if people don't get our product, then goodbye to them. And I'm like, wait a minute. I hear you. But, there's natural apprehension when something is new. But I very fundraiser style, it might not be a yes today, but it could be a yes tomorrow. It's all relationship based. And I genuinely believe that. And so I don't believe in leaving anyone out of the conversation. I believe everyone has a seat at the table and a voice at the table, even if you don't like that voice.
At the beginning of AI, I understood the hesitancy for nonprofits. Nonprofits in general, I recommend not being early adopters of technology, because things are changing very, very rapidly. Mm-hmm. But at this point in time, in 2025 now, or in May, you need to have some kind of element of AI. You don't need to, but it would be to your detriment not to have one. Let's put it that way. There's just too many benefits of using AI in some capacity that you're doing yourself a disservice by not using it. So I totally get that. I also appreciate your partner and I should have a conversation, because we get along really, really well. I used to have that attitude as well. If you can't get it, if you can't see the technology is the way, then, we're done this conversation. That's kind of cute. Obviously, it's not the right, you have to be a bit more patient, a bit more understanding, and introduce the topic, maybe differently and slowly. but it's important not to, not to lose your cool and not to lose your patience. And I'm happy that you balance them out in that regard. I was wondering then, in terms of AI itself, because you've talked about, autonomy, there is a concern, I think, in the nonprofit space, especially where people are like, and you mentioned, that some nonprofits don't even want to use AI because they don't want to lose that sense of humanity. But there obviously, hopefully, is a balance between the two where you can use and leverage AI and the power of AI to be able to do things that maybe you don't want to do or can't do that well that AI can, and keep your autonomy and keep your human side. And I was curious to know your perspective on where is that balance? Is there a balance, and where is it?
Yeah, I mean, I want to make sure that, I can only speak to this in the sense of how I've used it and how our product uses it. And that really is to automate workflows. So things that a human doesn't need to do in fundraising. So the autofill capability of your organization's information into a grant. You don't, a computer can do copy and paste. A human doesn't have to. Where I think it can get touchy is the human side of fundraising. And I think fundraising is supposed to be very human. Like I said before, I think it's an emotional exchange more than anything. And so I'm looking for and I'm looking for fundraisers to automate their workflows. I do want us to get there so that we can make sure that we are spending more time in the human engagement such a tech heavy world. And that's something that's like a common talking point in fundraising is no one cares about relationships anymore. And I'm like, yeah, yes, but fundraising has evolved. It's a different world than it was 50 years ago. And so people's relationships look different. We engage in giving differently, and we are more tech centered in how we just engage in the world. And so I do think that fundraisers have to adapt, and the things that are meant for technology are meant for technology. And then let's use the rest of our time to make sure that fundraising does stay human. I don't think we want giving to be impersonal. That is my gut feeling as a fundraiser, though. I can't speak for how the rest of the world feels, but I know when I give to an organization, it feels personal. And I know when I've asked people for gifts, it felt personal. We built that relationship. Even with a grant application, I was telling someone, yes, you submit that grant application. And when that funder sees that name, they go through a log. Oh, I've heard that name somewhere. Oh, I had a friend who went to an event they put on. They start to create a relationship even in their head, not even one that the person who submitted that application knew about, or that mission spoke to them because they had an experience. And I don't think that people sometimes even realize how many nonprofits they come in contact with a day. And so I think it's really important, like we use tech to automate all the busy work. Let's automate it so that we can continue to make mission work, nonprofit work, fundraising, engagement human. Because it feels good. It feels good to help people. It feels good to be supported. And I don't think that that's something that technology or AI could ever replace.
I definitely hope not.
Me too.
I'm curious of then changing the topic a bit to grant writing. I had a guest on not long ago talking more deeply about grant writing, and the superpower that they wish they had was the ability for grant writing or grant application to be like filling out a job application on LinkedIn, where you click a couple boxes, you upload something, and it's as simple and straightforward as that. I'm curious to know your perspective on that answer.
Well, one, they should use my product because it's very close to that. But two, yeah, I believe in that aspect. I think where we're going with grant applications is that application is just the entry point into the relationship. And so you have not most, but a lot of nonprofits, they can tailor their language, but a lot of people like writing their content, even if they're using AI, they like that story building, that narrative building is important. Again, that's another personal part. But that part, yes, let's continue to build. And then The autofill part, send it off. And then the reading part, the funder reading the story, that's the other human part. So yeah, I'm all about the automation of the click, because even if we break it down to resumes, I spent time, I wrote down my skills. This is what I'm good at. This is what I did at that job. I took pride in that. These are the numbers I made. These are my metrics. That feels personal. I take pride in that work, even in creating that resume. Even if I did have AI help me, right? I put that into that AI, like, I did this. Now spit me something else that's really eloquent, that shows that I did this well. And then on the receiving end, when someone going with the job application thing, when an employer sees the application, they're like, oh my gosh, this person, they fit our work. They get it. Or I see something in them. I see myself. Oh, wow. So there's that human part on both sides, the creation and then the receiving. And I think that middle section, that send, I love the idea of automating that, because that provides more connections and faster, which is really what we want to get to. People meeting their people.
Have you seen the comic? It's like a 2-panel comic where at the front and the left side it says, look at this cool AI. You can take one bullet point and extrapolate it and expand it to multiple paragraphs that are eloquent and this and that, to be able to submit to the other person. And the other person in the right panel says, look at this. I got this AI that takes all this beautiful paragraphs and summarizes into one bullet point.
Yes, that is where we're going, where, even on the funder side, the amount of applications that funders are receiving is increasing, right? And grant writing is a numbers game. So people are submitting, and funders will, get to a point where the volume is high, and they will need to make sure that they will use AI to make sure that they're finding nonprofits that meet these are the things that we support. These are, and not to say that it's going to take the human aspect out of it, but it will help them better align. But we do that now with job applications, so that's not a new process. And that is, we do need that. We do need to synthesize information so that, like I said, the right people are matching with the right people. You want funders that believe in your mission, and you want nonprofits that align with your goals as a funder. It goes both ways.
So I'm curious if you could explain just a couple more sentences about how your app works, because you said it's almost like what I mentioned earlier.
Yes.
And it's an auto-populate more than a generation tool. So maybe if you could explain a couple of more comments on it so people who are curious can learn.
Yeah, so Grantyd has 2 tools that it leverages to help with applying for grants. So the first is a web extension, and you go to a grant application. So it doesn't help you find grants, but you have a grant in mind, or you get a grant through the many other softwares that help you find grants, even ChatGPT. And you go to that grant application, and the web extension extracts all those questions from the application into a workable doc in our platform, our proposal platform. So that's our other tool. So it extracts all those questions via the web extension, and it takes you to your proposal, which is set up very similar to it's a mix between a Google form and a Google Doc. So all the questions are now structured, so there's no styling issues, and they have these different boxes. And you can either type and answer each question as you would normally in a grant application, but now you have this autonomy. You don't have to log back into the portal. You don't have to wait to fill out one page to go to the next. You just have all the questions there, and you can take your time filling them out, have other people review them if they need to also be part of the grant application process. Or you can upload your organization's documents, your boilerplate documents. That could be past grants, a mission statement, strategic plan, budget, and you can use AI to fill out the first draft of the application. So either way, you can type it yourself or use AI to fill out that first draft of the application questions using your organization's documents. And then you go back to the grant application and you use that same web extension to auto-populate those answers, whether you generated them yourself or use AI to help you. And so again, it keeps that autonomy of, I decide to write my grant myself, or I can use AI. And again, you still have to have your documents, so it's not fabrication. It's curation. There's no hallucinating involved, as you would say in the AI space, but it keeps that autonomy that this is my grant. I'm working on it in the time I need to work on it, but it automates the process. So if you don't want to do any writing, example, I applied for a grant that I apply for every year, and I use the grant application from the last year to apply to the new year. It's a tried and true grant. It's a tried and true relationship. And the AI just updated the dates for me. And so I just did a once over, and I just auto-populated the answers back and clicked submit. A grant that would normally take me probably over an hour, to make sure I, going through, copying all the dates, reworking the wording. It took me 10 minutes. So it significantly cuts down the time. And the ROI, on that in this space, when it comes to time and the amount of time fundraisers have, is invaluable. And it was for me when I was grant writing.
It's amazing that you were able to take a product that you knew served you and you realized it could serve others and then make it available to others. So congratulations on that. Maybe you could share also some more details about how people can reach out to you and learn more about the app and follow up with any other questions they may have about the episode.
Yeah, well, you can find us at grantyd.com. That's Grantyd, GRANTYD.com. We just finished our beta, and so we launched this month in May. Like many startups, our launch date has changed a couple times, but I wouldn't have it any other way. And you can also follow me on LinkedIn at Francesca Frederick. I do have that additional last name, Axam, AXAM, that sometimes creeps in there from before I was married. You can follow me on LinkedIn. And I actually will be popping up at different events. I go to a lot of conferences. So if you see me, please stop by and say hi. I'll be doing a webinar with the Chronicle of Philanthropy in May. It's free. Would love for people to come to that. It's a deep dive into grant data from 2024 IRS metrics. So yeah, just moving about in the grant and tech space.
Awesome. Francesca, thank you so much for sharing your insights. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Yes, thank you so much, Alex. It was wonderful.
All right, that's it for today. I'm Alexander Lapa, and I hope you join me again in the next Agents of Nonprofit.